first thing I noticed wasn't the perfume, it was the silence. The kind of silence that wears heels. It clicked its way down the hallway, pausing at the framed photos where Mark and I grinned like a catalogue couple, then stopped at the front door where his briefcase still sat, half open, as if he'd dropped it mid-act. Our house had that kind of quiet that only shows up after something has shifted. You don't see it right away, but you feel it. Like someone swapped your sugar for salt and waited for you to taste it. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Mark was late again. Lately, he was always late. Something about helping a client who apparently smelled like a luxury department store. I wasn't the jealous type, or at least that's what I kept telling myself as I sniffed the air like a detective who had finally lost her sense of humor. I tried to focus on my laptop. The glow of my latest design project painted the kitchen counter in pale blue. Minimalist beauty packaging, the client had said, which basically meant, make this overpriced moisturizer look like it saves lives. I should have been sketching mock-ups, but my brain had long checked out. He'd texted an hour ago. Running late. Don't wait up. Sure. I'd been not waiting up for 3 weeks straight now. When I finally heard his key in the door, it was almost midnight. I stayed at the counter, fingers on the keyboard, pretending to be too absorbed to care. He came in smelling faintly of citrus and something floral. Definitely not office air freshener. "Hey, Anna," he said, that smooth, professional tone he used with clients. "Long day." "Sure," I said, eyes still on the screen. Must be exhausting being indispensable. He kissed the top of my head, a mechanical gesture, and walked upstairs. His shoes made no noise. Maybe that was the part that scared me most, how quiet he'd become in our own house. Later, lying in bed beside him, I listened to the soft rhythm of his breathing. I'd forgotten what it felt like to trust that sound. By the next morning, the doubt had grown legs. I didn't plan to snoop, but the universe sometimes drops you right into temptation's lap and dares you not to look. Mark's phone buzzed on the table while he was in the shower. One little preview flashed on the screen. "Can't wait to see you again." L. My hand moved before my brain could protest. Just an initial. L short, neat, like someone who signs birthday cards for everyone in the office. I stared at that letter for a long time, pretending it could mean Liam or Larry, though we didn't know any Liams or Larrys, but we did know a Lila, my best friend. I shut the phone, placed it exactly as it was, and sat on the edge of the bed. The water stopped. When Mark came out, towel around his waist, he looked perfectly normal. "Morning coffee?" he asked. I smiled like nothing was wrong, because women like me, polite, efficient, suburban, know the art of pretending. "Sure. Make it strong." By the time I got to my office downtown, the sarcasm was the only thing keeping me upright. My coworker Jenna waved from her desk. "Rough night?" "You could say that," I said, settling at my workstation. "My husband's schedule and I are currently seeing other people." She laughed, assuming I was joking. That's the thing about humor. It's the only socially acceptable way to scream. At lunch, I got a text from Lila. "Wine night soon? I miss you." My thumb hovered over the reply button, but I didn't type. I stared at her profile picture. Perfect hair, perfect teeth, perfect little liar. That evening, I arrived home to find Mark already there, eating takeout like nothing had ever happened. He looked up with that boyish smile that once made me forgive late nights and half-kept promises. "How was your day?" he asked. "Productive," I said. "Yours?" "Busy," he said automatically. "Big client drama. You know how it is." "Oh, absolutely," I said, sitting across from him. "Saving the world, one spreadsheet at a time." He chuckled. "Something like that." We ate in silence, and I wondered how many lies a person could swallow before they choked. After dinner, he went to his office upstairs. I cleaned the kitchen mechanically, the same way I used to clean my studio apartment after college when I was too broke to have problems. I caught my reflection in the window, mascara smudged, hair messy, smile gone. I'd built my life on good design, yet somehow I'd missed the cracks forming in my own marriage. When the walls started to close in, I left. No plan, just car keys and a duffel bag. It was nearly midnight again when I pulled into the cheap roadside motel 5 miles from Willow Lane. The neon sign blinked vacancy in weary red. Inside, the manager looked half asleep, flipping through a magazine. "Just one night," I said, handing over my card. He nodded, slid a plastic key toward me and pointed. "Room 9, end of the hall." The room smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and regret. I dropped my bag on the bed, kicked off my shoes, and sat down. The carpet pattern looked like someone had spilled secrets and tried to scrub them out. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stared at the ceiling fan until its slow rotation blurred the edges of thought. When I finally moved to unpack, something caught my eye. A corner of dark leather sticking out from under the bed. I crouched and pulled it free. A vintage suitcase, the kind you'd see in old movies. Brown leather, worn handle, silver latch. My name was written on a faded tag, Anna Grant. I froze. This couldn't be right. I opened it carefully, expecting old clothes, maybe a forgotten belonging of a previous guest. Instead, stacks of cash, neatly bound, filled half the space. The other half held a folded train ticket to a town I didn't recognize, and a note. "The real treasure is awaiting you here." I read it 3 times. The handwriting was elegant, deliberate. Was someone playing a joke? Some twisted motel prank? I checked the suitcase for anything else. No ID, no sender, just my name. I sat back on the bed, staring at the note. "Well, Anna," I muttered, "either you've just been adopted by a generous stalker, or the universe has a terrible sense of humor." Sarcasm was the only glue holding my sanity together. Sleep didn't come easy. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Mark's phone screen glowing in the dark, that single initial taunting me. L. In the morning, the world looked the same but felt different, like I'd crossed into a story that had been happening behind my back all along. I made motel coffee, which tasted like cardboard dipped in bitterness, and spread the contents of the suitcase across the bed. Cash. Ticket. Note. Logical people don't find suitcases of cash with their names on them. Logical people don't run from their perfect houses either, but here I was. I looked at the ticket again. The destination was a small town less than an hour away. I pulled up the address on my phone. A property listed years ago under a business name I vaguely recognized from Mark's files. Grant Holdings, LLC. It made no sense. Why would something with my name lead back to his company? I spent the rest of the morning pacing. The motel manager knocked once to ask if I needed more towels. I almost asked him if he'd planted the suitcase just to see his reaction. Instead, I smiled too wide and said, "No thanks. Everything's fine." Everything was not fine. By noon, curiosity had overpowered caution. I packed the suitcase back up, locked the room, and drove toward the address. The road narrowed as I left the main highway. Suburbia gave way to long stretches of neglected fields. Finally, I turned onto a cracked driveway, leading to what looked like an old farmhouse half swallowed by trees. The paint was peeling, the porch sagging like it had forgotten its purpose. I parked and sat there for a moment, staring at the place. No cars, no movement, just the quiet hum of summer heat. When I stepped inside, dust motes swirled through the sunlight like lazy snow. The house smelled of wood and something faintly metallic. The front room was empty except for a desk and a few boxes stacked near the window. I opened one. Contracts, receipts, company files, all with my name printed neatly across the top. I flipped through page after page, each one a stranger's reflection of my life. Accounts I'd never opened, signatures that looked like mine but weren't. I laughed out loud, sharp, humorless. Oh, Mark, you charming disaster. The realization came slowly, then all at once. He hadn't just cheated, he'd used me. Somewhere between helping clients and late meetings, my loving husband had built an entire shell company in my name. I gathered a few files and stuffed them into my bag. My pulse thudded in my ears, steady and deliberate. When I stepped outside again, the wind had picked up, rustling through the trees. My car gleamed under the sun like it was waiting to drive me into a completely different life. I got in, shut the door, and exhaled. "Congratulations, Anna," I said to my reflection in the rearview mirror. "You just found the plot twist." The phone buzzed. "Mark." I didn't answer. The message preview glowed on the screen. "Where are you? We need to talk." I smiled for the first time in days, small and sure. "Soon," I whispered, "just not the way you think." I put the car in gear, turned onto the main road and drove back toward the motel, the suitcase secure beside me. For once, the silence didn't bother me. It sounded almost like a promise, and somewhere deep down, beneath the sarcasm and exhaustion, a new thought began to take shape. Steady, sharp, unstoppable. He had taken everything, my trust, my name, my home. Now I was going to take something back. I woke to the sound of someone knocking on the motel door. It took me a second to remember where I was. The lemon-scented walls, the hum of the ancient air conditioner, the unfamiliar weight of the suitcase sitting on the carpet. My mind felt fuzzy, like a channel that hadn't tuned in yet. The knock came again, softer this time. "Housekeeping," a woman called. No thanks," I said, scrambling out of bed. "I'm fine." She moved on, her cart squeaking down the hallway. I sat on the edge of the bed, hair a mess, heart steady but restless. The suitcase looked even more out of place in the daylight. I could almost convince myself I'd dreamed the whole thing, except the note was still there, tucked neatly under the strap. "The real treasure is awaiting you here." Treasure. Right. Whoever wrote that clearly hadn't met my accountant husband. I made motel coffee again, which tasted even worse the second day, and spread everything out on the bed. Stacks of cash, the train ticket, the note. I checked each bill. Real, old, but crisp. The kind of money that doesn't belong in a motel room. I told myself not to jump to conclusions. Maybe someone left this for another Anna Grant. Sure, what are the odds? About the same as finding buried treasure in the motel parking lot. Still, curiosity had its hooks in me. I opened my laptop and searched the destination printed on the train ticket, Ashford, Maine. Population, small. Businesses, smaller. But one address caught my eye, listed under property records. Grant Holdings, LLC. I'd seen that name before, on some of Mark's documents when he'd accidentally left his office door unlocked. It was supposed to be a side investment company. Apparently, it also owned a forgotten house on the outskirts of Ashford. I sat back, staring at the screen. Either I was connecting dots that didn't belong together, or Mark's fingerprints were all over this. I spent most of the morning debating whether to go. Logic said no. Logic also said I shouldn't be sitting in a motel room with unmarked cash and an anonymous note. Logic and I had a complicated relationship lately. By noon, I was packing the suitcase into my car. The drive out of town was hypnotic. Flat roads, endless power lines, the kind of scenery that gives your thoughts too much room. My brain flipped between anger, sarcasm, and disbelief. Somewhere between the gas station coffee and the empty highway, I realized I wasn't just curious anymore. I was hunting. Ashford appeared after an hour. A quiet town with faded storefronts and a diner that looked like it hadn't changed since the 80s. The GPS led me through the main street, past a row of tidy houses and gossip-ready porches, until it told me to turn down a gravel road bordered by maples. At the end stood a 2-story house with peeling white paint and windows half covered by grime. I parked and sat there, engine running. "Well," I said out loud, "this screams good decision." The house didn't answer, just stared back with the empty patience of something used to keeping secrets. I grabbed the suitcase and stepped out. The air smelled like wet wood and something faintly metallic. The front door was locked, but the side entrance gave way after one firm push. Inside, dust coated everything: floorboards, picture frames, a desk in the corner. The light that filtered through the curtains was thin and grey. I coughed once and pulled my sleeve over my nose. The living room was half empty, except for a few boxes stacked against the wall. A faded sign leaned in the corner: Grant Holdings, LLC, Property Management. I approached the boxes. Inside were folders, contracts, receipts, corporate records. Every single one had my name. Not just printed, signed. My handwriting, copied with surgical precision. For a second, I felt disoriented, as if I'd stumbled into a version of my life that someone else was living better. Then logic snapped back in. Mark had used my identity, my name. I sat on the dusty floor, flipping through the papers. The dates matched the months he'd started coming home late. Each file showed transactions from companies I'd never heard of, wiring money through shell accounts. The more I read, the more the world tilted. It wasn't just betrayal, it was strategy. He'd planned this. A floorboard creaked behind me. I turned sharply, but no one was there. Only the faint sound of wind through the broken pane in the kitchen. My nerves were shot, but my instincts were sharp enough to catch something else. A faint light blinking on a small router tucked behind the desk. Wi-Fi. Active. I hesitated, then connected my laptop. The network came up immediately. GHLLC admin. No password required. Either Mark was arrogant or careless, probably both. Inside the shared folder, my stomach sank. Photos of documents, screenshots of bank transfers, emails between Mark and someone named Lilam Realty. Leela. Her name sat there in bold, smug letters, as if daring me to deny it. One of the messages read, "Don't worry, she'll never find out. She's too focused on her work. By the time it's done, she'll sign anything I put in front of her." I laughed under my breath, short and humorless. Guess I missed the fine print on that marriage certificate. Still, I copied every file onto a flash drive I found in the desk drawer. My hands shook, not from fear, but from the rush of realization. I wasn't powerless. I had proof. The air outside had grown heavier, the kind that promises rain. As I walked to my car, I spotted a figure near the tree line. A man, tall, wearing a cap, watching. I froze, suitcase in one hand, laptop in the other. He turned and walked away, quick and casual, like he hadn't just been observing a stranger rummaging through a deserted property. I got in my car and locked the doors. The watcher vanished down the dirt path, but I wasn't sticking around to introduce myself. I drove off, tires crunching over gravel, and didn't slow until I hit the main road. At the next gas station, I stopped to breathe and think. The attendant, a teenager with too much acne and too little enthusiasm, eyed the suitcase in the passenger seat. "Vacation?" he asked. "Something like that," I said. Back at the motel, I spread out everything on the bed again. Files, flash drive, note. I replayed the memory of the man near the house. Was he part of it? Mark's associate? Or just some nosy local wondering why a woman in city clothes was sneaking around an old property? I ordered takeout from the diner next door and opened my laptop again. Inside, one of the copied folders was a spreadsheet, Mark's digital signature everywhere. The numbers didn't lie. He'd been transferring funds through accounts under my name, making it look like I was the one running his little empire. It wasn't just about money. It was about control. If things went wrong, I'd be the one to take the fall. My phone buzzed. "Mark again. We need to talk. Please answer." I turned it face down and took a long sip of flat soda. When the food arrived, the delivery guy gave me a knowing look. "Rough day?" You have no idea, I said, tipping him more than I should. After dinner, I went over everything again, piecing the puzzle together. It all made twisted sense now. The new car, he said, was for work. The extra bank account he'd claimed was for expenses, the late nights, the secrecy. And of course, Lila, conveniently skilled in real estate paperwork. Mark hadn't just been cheating with her. He'd been using her to move property, some of which, apparently, was in my name. Around midnight, I heard muffled voices outside the motel. 2 women laughing near the vending machine. One of them said, "Did you hear about that woman at Willow Lane? Her husband ran off with her best friend. They say she checked into this place." I froze. Gossip travels faster than truth, especially in towns where lawns are trimmed within an inch of their lives. The voices faded, but their words hung in the air. My private humiliation had already become community entertainment. Perfect. I shut the curtains and lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. The faint hum of the air conditioner filled the silence. My thoughts drifted to Lila's text from yesterday. "Why night soon? I miss you." The nerve. I picked up my phone, typed a message, then erased it. Revenge wasn't about words. It was about timing. The next morning, I woke early, packed the suitcase again, and went to the small cafe across the street. The waitress, an older woman with a soft Maine accent, refilled my coffee 3 times before asking, "You traveling alone, honey?" "Guess so," I said. "Well," she said with a half smile, "people who come through here alone usually leave different than they arrived." I couldn't tell if that was meant to be comforting or prophetic. When I returned to my room, a business card had been slid under the door. No name, just a phone number and a handwritten note. "You're not the only one he lied to." I sat down hard on the bed, the card trembling slightly in my hand. Another piece to the puzzle. Another person Mark had burned? For a long moment, I considered calling the number. Curiosity tugged at me again. That same reckless instinct that had led me to the old house. But something in me said to wait. I needed to stay 2 steps ahead, not fall into someone else's plan. I tucked the card into my wallet and opened my laptop once more. My cursor hovered over the folder of copied files. I had everything I needed: proof of his lies, his company's transactions, his connection to Lila. I didn't know exactly how I'd use it yet, but I knew one thing for certain: I wasn't running anymore. Later that evening, Mark called again. This time, I answered. "Anna? Thank God," he said quickly. "Where are you?" "Working," I said. "You disappeared. I've been worried sick." "Funny," I said, my voice steady. "You didn't sound worried when you were texting Lila." Silence stretched on the line. "I don't know what you think you saw," he said finally. "You're overreacting." "Am I?" I said. "Because I just took a little trip to Ashford. Lovely place, great for family businesses." He hesitated. "Anna, listen to me." But I'd already hung up. I stared at my reflection in the dark window, the faint glow of neon flickering over my face. I looked tired but sharp, like someone who'd stopped waiting for apologies. Outside, the motel sign buzzed quietly. Inside, my laptop screen lit up with the evidence of his lies. I didn't know yet what I'd do next, but the path was starting to take shape. Clear, deliberate, and more dangerous than anything I'd ever designed. The real treasure, it seemed, wasn't money, it was truth, and I was finally ready to spend it. I woke before sunrise, restless and wired, my mind already sprinting ahead of my body. The motel room felt smaller than it had the day before. Every creak of the air conditioner, every flicker of the neon light outside the window, pressed against my nerves like static. I'd spent the night replaying Mark's voice on the phone, that smooth mix of fake concern and quiet panic. He wasn't calling because he missed me. He was calling because he knew I'd found something. I showered, dressed, and shoved the suitcase under the bed. I didn't need to carry a bag full of cash around every time I left the room. Besides, it was starting to feel more like a message than a gift. I pocketed the flash drive, grabbed my keys, and left before the sun fully rose. The air outside was sharp, cool. I drove without music, just the sound of tires on pavement, and my thoughts turning into plans. I wasn't the kind of person who plotted revenge. I was the kind who organized file folders by color and believed in fair resolutions. But somewhere between finding that suitcase and hearing Mark's practiced lies, I'd changed. I stopped at a coffee shop on the edge of town. The girl behind the counter, all piercings and bright eyeliner, smiled at me. "You look like you haven't slept." "I haven't," I said. "Coffee, big one." She handed me a cup that smelled strong enough to fix a broken heart. "Rough week?" "You could say that." She grinned. "Rough weeks make good stories." I sipped the coffee and thought about that. Maybe one day this would make a good story. But right now it was just a mess. I parked outside the same property in Ashford. The house looked worse in daylight. The paint blistered, the windows fogged with grime. But this time, I wasn't here to marvel at Mark's betrayal. I was here to gather every scrap of proof. The side door opened again without resistance. Dust floated lazily through the beams of sunlight that spilled across the floorboards. I turned on my phone's flashlight and started opening drawers, searching through cabinets, peeling back layers of the life he'd built in my name. Contracts, receipts, a ledger filled with names that meant nothing to me, but were probably worth millions to someone else. And more signatures. Mine, copied so precisely it made my skin crawl. I found a safe behind a false panel in the study. It was small, black, and combination locked. I stared at it, trying to think like Mark. He wasn't creative, just predictable. I tried our anniversary date, nothing. His birthday, nothing. My birthday, click. Inside were a phone, a few memory cards, and a stack of old photographs. The phone was turned off, but when I pressed the power button, it vibrated weakly and lit up. No passcode. Mark really had gotten sloppy. I opened the photo app first. There were images of houses, documents, checks. But what stopped me cold was a picture of Lila standing in front of this very house, smiling, holding a clipboard, like she was posing for a real estate listing. Her caption read, "Another successful property with my favorite partner in crime." I laughed out loud. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was disbelief given shape. "Of course you'd document your treachery like a holiday," I said to the empty air. Then something moved behind me, a faint sound, like a footstep or a floorboard settling, but too deliberate to ignore. I turned slowly, phone still lit. The beam landed on a man standing halfway down the hall. Same baseball cap as before. "Can I help you?" I asked, voice sharp. He held up his hands. "Whoa, hey, you must be Anna." "Excuse me." "I work for Mark," he said, taking a cautious step forward. "Name's Carter. He told me to come check the place. Said there might be a leak or something." I didn't move. "A leak?" "Yeah," he said, glancing around the room. "This property's been under his name for a while. You're not supposed to be here, you know." "Funny," I said. "It's under my name now." He frowned. "I don't think that's right." "Oh, I'm sure you don't." I reached into my bag and pulled out the phone I'd found. "Recognize this?" His eyes darted to it, then to me. He shifted on his feet. "Listen, I don't want trouble. I just do maintenance. That's it." "Then maintain your distance," I said. He hesitated like he wanted to say more, then turned and walked out the door. I waited until I heard his truck start before moving again. My hands were shaking slightly, but my focus was razor-sharp now. I copied the files from the phone to my laptop, then tucked everything, photos, flash drive, documents, into a backpack. The longer I stayed, the higher the chance that Mark would send someone else. Before leaving, I took one last look at the dusty office. I could almost picture him here, sitting at that desk, forging my signature while humming to himself. The image was so vivid, it made my stomach twist. Back in the car, I checked my messages. None from Mark, just one new text from an unknown number. "You shouldn't have gone back there. No signature, no context." I stared at it, half expecting the screen to blink again, with another message. Nothing came. I drove back toward town, pulse steady, mind spinning through possibilities. Whoever had sent that text knew what I'd done, and that meant I wasn't invisible anymore. By the time I reached the motel, my nerves had caught up with me. I parked at the back instead of the front, out of sight of the main road. Inside my room, I locked the door and drew the curtains. The walls felt closer now, but I had work to do. I connected the flash drive, the phone, the memory cards, all of it, to my laptop. A river of data spilled across the screen. Transaction histories, invoices, scanned IDs, tax forms. Every piece pointed back to Mark. He'd built an entire business on paper, using my name as camouflage. The realization came in waves, and I couldn't decide if I wanted to laugh or throw something. "Congratulations, Anna," I muttered. "You're apparently a criminal mastermind." The motel's internet connection was slow, but I managed to upload copies of the files to a secure folder, just in case Mark decided to get creative. Later that afternoon, I decided to take a walk to clear my head. The small town looked almost peaceful. People walking dogs, a couple arguing quietly outside a bakery, the smell of rain in the air. Normal life continuing, blissfully unaware of the chaos spinning inside my head. When I got back, someone had slipped another note under my door. "You're playing with fire. Walk away." I didn't even bother to panic this time. I just tore the note in half and tossed it into the trash. The rest of the evening, I spent outlining what I knew. Step by step, file by file. Mark had created fake companies. Lila had helped move the properties. They'd both used my name. The missing piece was why, and how much. At around 9, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was Lila. "We need to talk, please." "You don't understand what's going on." I stared at the message for a long time, then typed back, "Oh, I think I understand perfectly." Her reply came fast. "No, you don't. Just meet me tomorrow. Morning. Same coffee shop we used to go to." I didn't answer right away. Meeting her felt reckless, but maybe recklessness was the only thing left. I texted back one word, "Fine." Then I shut off my phone and lay on the bed, eyes fixed on the ceiling fan. The rhythmic whirring should have been soothing, but my thoughts wouldn't quiet. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that old house, the files, the man in the cap. The next morning, I arrived at the coffee shop early. Lila was already there, looking perfectly polished in a cream blazer and sunglasses too big for her face. She smiled when she saw me, that same bright, rehearsed smile she used to charm clients. "Anna," she said, standing as if nothing had happened. "You look good." "I'd say the same, but I don't lie before caffeine," I said, sliding into the seat across from her. She sighed, lowering her glasses. "You found the house." "I did. And the files." "Also that." She stirred her coffee like she was in a commercial. "You have to understand, Mark didn't mean for you to get hurt. It was supposed to be temporary." I laughed softly. "Temporary identity theft? That's a new one." Her jaw tightened. "He said he'd fix it. He said it was just paperwork to keep investors calm. You know how the system works." "I know how my signature works," I said. "And that wasn't me signing." She looked away. "He promised me it was harmless." "Harmless?" I leaned forward. "He used my name to launder money, Lila. That's not harmless, it's criminal. You helped him." Her eyes flashed. "Don't act like you're innocent. You benefited too. The cars, the house, the trips. Where do you think that came from?" The words hit hard, but I didn't flinch. "You think comfort equals complicity. That's rich coming from the woman who helped him steal it." She looked around the cafe, lowering her voice. "You need to let this go, Anna. He's panicking. If you make noise, it'll backfire, on all of us." "Oh, I plan to make noise," I said, standing. "You might want to buy earplugs." I walked out before she could reply. The air outside was cool, sharp, alive. My heart raced, not from fear, but from something else. control. By the time I reached the motel, I had a new plan forming. The files weren't enough on their own. I needed leverage, something that would force Mark to face me, not hide behind Lila or his company. That evening, I opened my laptop again. Every document, every email, every transfer, all tied neatly back to him. I created a file labeled Insurance and uploaded everything. Then I scheduled an email to myself from an anonymous address, just in case anything happened to my copies. Mark had built a world of lies using my name. Now I was going to make sure that world collapsed, and that everyone in it watched the fall. As I shut the laptop, I noticed something in the corner of the room, a small camera, hidden under the wall lamp, blinking faintly. I froze. Then I smiled, slow and steady. "Well, Mark," I whispered, "if you're watching, I hope you're taking notes." Outside, thunder rolled in the distance. The storm was coming, and for once I was ready for it. I told myself revenge would be methodical, surgical, clean. Part of me imagined it like one of my design projects: clear brief, measured steps, elegant execution. The reality was grubbier, louder, and required a level of petty creativity I'd never thought I possessed. Turns out fury is an excellent teacher. I spent the morning like a tradesperson preparing tools. Not literal tools. My sleeves stayed clean, but the digital kind: accounts, passwords, timing. Mark had been sloppy in a few places. Arrogance leaves footprints if you know where to look. Lila, on the other hand, was meticulous in public and lazy in private. She loved spectacle and underappreciated subtlety. That was about to change. Her open house was scheduled for Sunday afternoon, 4 to 6. The listing looked perfect in glossy photos: oak floors, a staged kitchen with artisanal jars, a vase of faux peonies that would make Martha Stewart sigh. Lila's agent photos were plastered all over the listing: cheery smile, hair in a lopsided wave, blazer that probably cost more than my laptop. She'd be hosting it, of course, fluttering from room to room with fluted excitement, while prospective buyers pretended they'd always wanted a banister like that. And somewhere between the coffee urn and the exit sign, she'd check her phone, and Mark would send her a message, congratulating her on another success. They were always careful, but not careful enough. I had two objectives: make sure everyone in attendance knew her real priorities, and do it in a way that wouldn't point back to me. Revenge that looks accidental was the purest kind. I wanted spectacle without fingerprints. First, the projection. Realtors love digital slideshows, photos of smiling families, bullet points about square footage, and, if you're Lila, a curated slideshow with a photo of yourself holding a clipboard with a caption about dedication. I'd copied Lila's presentation file from the shared drive connected to Grant Holdings. There it was, bland and eager. I created a duplicate and swapped a few images, professional headshots with a twist, not disgusting or obscene. I keep my acts strategic, not cruel, but enough to lay bare the intimacy Lila had sought in private. I inserted a series of screenshots I'd found on Mark's phone. A coffee shop selfie labeled "Can't Wait", 2 images of Lila and Mark embracing in a car, a cozy shot on a family picnic blanket that was supposed to read future promises. I saved it as Open House Final, revised and uploaded it to a cloud link, then scheduled an email to the listing agent, anonymous of course, claiming there was an updated slideshow for the open house. The listing agent, honest to the bone or careless, downloaded and queued it up. Timing was everything. I drove to the neighborhood early, pretending to be a curious shopper. Suburbia at that hour smells like fresh-cut grass and understated ambitions. I parked 2 houses down, far enough to look casual, close enough to keep an eye. Through the bay window, I could see Lila fussing with a tray of cookies, eyeliner precise, laughter practiced. She was an actress on her best stage. I'd arranged for something else too, small, theatrical, and the kind of thing that requires a sprinkler system and the kind of wiring neglected by most homeowners. a scheduled release of the garden sprinklers. I didn't rig anything myself. I don't own that level of handy talent. I used a contact I'd made through a vendor listed on one of the property invoices, someone who owed Mark a favor and wasn't fond of him. A discreet call, a modest payment, and the sprinkler schedule was altered to run during the hour of highest attendance. Wet carpets ruin curb appeal faster than any bad review. Guests arrived in the predictable parade, a couple with a toddler, two women sipping kombucha and critiquing tile, an older man who probably had more money than taste. They clicked through the rooms, murmured about crown molding, and pretended the house represented dreams rather than liabilities. Lila flitted among them, perfume and harness charm, as if charm alone could backstop a ledger. At 4:47, the slideshow began. The room darkened for romantic effect. A LED screen flickered and then filled with images of staged breakfasts and polished counters. People leaned in. Leila started to talk. Square footage, school districts, a tangent about the walkability of the neighborhood. Her voice was that practice thing that tells people what they want to hear. Then, like a corrective eye, the images changed. A screenshot of Mark's phone, complete with message preview. Can't wait to see you tonight. The room tilted. Murmurs surfed the air. People glanced at each other, at Lila, at the screen. The slideshow didn't stop at one image. It moved on. Laughter in a car, a picnic that looked less like a family day and more like a weekend that had found a way to hide. The music on the slideshow, that benign, unobtrusive piano track, kept playing, cruelly indifferent. Faces shifted. The toddler's mother crossed her arms. The older man's face went stony. The two kombucha women whispered, then leaned toward the exit like they'd remembered an appointment. Leela's smile faltered, then came back on like a costume she'd practiced. She smiled and said, "All right, who supplied this?" Her voice was tight. I stood against the doorway, small, unobtrusive, and watched the scene unfold like a director who'd finally gotten the right take. Leela's hands fluttered to her phone. The listing agent swore softly, scrambling for the remote. "That's not the file he began. He looked at his device, at the date, at the file name, at the screen. People had phones out now. Murmurs turned to scattered phone camera clicks. Then the sprinklers engaged. A soft hiss at first, then a little more insistent, like a mischief-loving chorus. Water filigreed the lawn, then arced over the porch and down the steps, turning curated peonies into wet confetti. An older couple gasped as a carpet square near the entrance softened and buckled. A woman shrieked when water splashed her dress. Lila's tray of cookies became a soggy afterthought. People moved like a school of fish, each responding to the small crisis with an eye for self-preservation. For a moment, chaos. Prospective buyers fled the house in various states of embarrassment, phones and shoes in hand. Conversations crackled like a poorly tuned radio. "I can't imagine a leak. What a shame. Not what we expected." Lila stood tall for a second, face composed, then turned white when someone took a photo and started walking back toward her car. The images on the phone screen were already circulating. Mark's messages, their private smiles, a narrative condensed into 200 pixels. I'd planned for humiliation, yes, but I hadn't wanted destruction, no permanent harm. I wanted her reputation rewritten in the same public square where she traded in curated versions of herself. As the crowd thinned, some people stayed, more curious than gone. Lila tried to laugh it off with a joke, but her voice was thin and brittle. She scanned the faces, which had turned from buyer to jury, and her eyes landed somewhere on me. For a second our gazes locked, and she saw me plainly. Not the frantic woman from name-brand therapy lists, but someone with the files in a bag in her car, and a new kind of patience. I raised my chin slightly, a small, cold acknowledgement. After, in the parking lot, things escalated with the irrepressible bluntness of real life. Lila stormed out, her heels slapping like punctuation. I followed at a measured distance. She opened the door of her sleek sedan and tried to shove in several buyers' comments like they were cushions. Fake warmth, thin covers. Her phone buzzed constantly, and finally she threw it to the passenger seat and leaned back, hands on the wheel. That was the moment I chose. I walked up, close enough to be noticed, and tapped the window. She rolled it down, eyes narrowed. "What do you want?" she said. Her voice had the practiced overlay of someone who'd always been able to make problems evaporate with a laugh. "You," I said. "Where's Mark?" She laughed a short bark. "If you're here for drama, try the theatre." "Your theatre just got a standing ovation," I said. "Congrats." She started to retort, indignation on the edge of her tone, and I reached for the spray paint in a paper bag I'd planted earlier behind a hedge. I'd chosen bright magenta, an aesthetic choice that would be impossible to ignore and entirely removable with time and money. I flicked the cap, took a breath, and with one clean motion sprayed the driver's side door with a flourish that left a streak like lipstick on a cheek. The color popped against the black finish, impossibly cheerful and impossible to ignore. Lila's face went a color that had nothing to do with paint. "What are you doing?" she hissed, stepping toward me. I kept my voice even. "Art restoration. You should try it sometime." Her hands flew up, fingers near her face, as if she might strike me. She didn't. She couldn't. Instead, she lunged forward and slapped me, hard enough that the sound landed in the car's interior with a satisfying, shameful slap. It was the kind of slap that announces someone has finally run out of options. I felt the sting across my cheek, a sharp punctuation, and for a breath I stood stunned, not from the contact, but from how quickly it clarified things. Her anger was all bluster. Her bravado was a paper shield. I tasted metal at the back of my throat, the kind you get when adrenaline sharpens your senses. I reached up and touched my cheek, feeling the heat of it, then did something both childish and precise. I wiped my palm on my jeans and held it up, like offering evidence for a drama. "Good choice," I said. "It shows character." She spat an obscenity, or something that sounded like one but wasn't in my list of forbidden words, and walked away, phone already in hand, calling someone who presumably would trot out a lawyer or a PR statement. The magenta on her car would last until the detailer got to it. The slideshow images were already being shared. The sprinklers might be explained away by faulty wiring, but the sequence, images, water, humiliation, was a story that would stick. As I walked back to my car, the adrenaline ebbed and left a heavy, hollow feeling. The act itself had been cleaner than I'd expected. Public humiliation, paint, a slap. I'd done the practical, the public thing, but I'd also taken a step into a new mode of being. I no longer felt like the woman who goes to design shows and makes polite small talk. I felt like an agent of consequences, and that realization was both frightening and deeply satisfying. On the drive home, my phone buzzed with a flurry of anonymous messages, screenshots of the slideshow, clips from the open house, speculative captions. People live for scandal. It's their native weather. My phone lit up with more messages, a forwarded screenshot with Mark's name in the header, a terse note from an unknown number. Keep going. I parked outside the motel and sat in the car for a moment, the cabin still smelling faintly of the coffee I'd drunk that morning. I thought about the slap and how it felt like a punctuation mark in a paragraph I hadn't finished writing yet. My cheek still tingled. My wrist bore a smudge of magenta paint that I'd failed to scrub entirely clean, and I smirked at that small, theatrical souvenir. Then the phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity is a stubborn engine. I tapped accept. "Anna." Mark's voice was a tempered wire, angry, worried, and not quite composed. "Where are you?" "Busy," I said, "selling houses." "Don't be clever," he said. "You're making things worse. Come home." "No." The word was quiet but unambiguous. "I'm not going anywhere until I have what I need." There was a pause, Then a different edge crept into his tone. "You don't understand what you've started." "I do," I said, "and I know how it ends for people who think behind closed doors they can do whatever they like." "Listen to me." He tried to take control of the conversation, the way he used tone like a tool. I cut him off. "Don't tell me to listen," I said. "You should start listening to yourself." He laughed, but it trembled. "You think you can ruin me? You think this is about you getting even? It's bigger than that." I closed my eyes and let the rain of traffic and motel neon wash over me. "It was my name you used," I said. "You made me the face of your mess. I'm not the one who needs a lesson." Another pause. "You have no idea what you're interfering with," he said finally. "There are people." "Then let them come," I said, "because I've been invisible for too long. I'd like one scene where they remember my name." He didn't reply. I could hear him breathing, the sound of someone planning damage control. "If you keep this up," he said at last, voice low, "I will make sure you never work again." Threats are the last resort of the empty-handed. I felt no fear. "Try it," I said. "You always did love a challenge." He hung up. The line clicked like a small verdict. I set my phone on the dashboard and watched the motel sign blink vacancy, a red blink that felt almost like encouragement. I touched the smudge of paint on my wrist and laughed, a short, private sound. The magenta would wash off in time. The slap would fade. What mattered was the movement I'd started, the ripple. Lila's smile had cracked in front of people who mattered. Mark had been given a signal that I wasn't a passive element in his story. By the time I went inside, the motel had settled into its usual nighttime breathing. Air conditioner hums, distant cars, the soft murmur of someone watching late-night television through thin walls. I lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling fan, thinking in sequences. Plans are just stories you tell yourself until they're true. Mine was beginning to look believable. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance. The sky threatened rain again, as if the weather itself had a vendetta. I welcomed it. Storms wash things away. They also reveal what's been hidden. I had a list now, and it was growing. People to confront, documents to secure, allies to find. The first layer had been peeled back. Public humiliation, a slap, a stake claimed. The next would be quieter, sharper, more dangerous in the 10,000 little ways that leave no obvious scar. Sleep came eventually, thin and tactical. I dreamed of spreadsheets folding into paper boats and floating away. When I woke, the world would be the same, but I wouldn't be, not anymore. The town smelled different the morning after the open house. It wasn't just the rain, though the sky had done its part, washing sidewalks and watering gardens until everything looked too clean. It was the way people moved, the small, subtle shifts in posture when they passed you on the sidewalk, like they were checking an invisible list for who belonged and who had a stain on their name. Gossip is a social currency here. It makes people rich or bankrupt in minutes. By noon, my inbox had become a small war zone. Screenshots, forwarded messages, tentative questions from former clients who suddenly remembered other commitments. I'd expected ripple effects from Lila's spectacle, but not this tidal wave. Mark's phone had been ringing off the hook with numbers he didn't recognize, investor numbers, vendor numbers, voices that used phrases like, "explain this," and "we're freezing transfers." I read everything with the calm of someone examining a map of a territory I'd decided to claim. Each new message was a road I could travel. I didn't gloat. That's not my style. I observed. I catalogued. I made lists in the margins of the documents I'd copied, names to contact, likely allies, people who owed favors, and might be persuaded to make trouble of their own. Mark had been careful in the way people who cheat with systems are careful. He layered lies like varnish. But varnish peels when you put the house in a storm. By mid-afternoon, the first official email landed in my anonymous inbox. An inquiry from a regulator. Nothing accusatory in words, just a request for clarification about transfers tied to an account in my name. I didn't reply immediately. I printed a copy, made 2 more, and slipped them into envelopes with no return address. I left one on Mark's expensive leather chair at home. He'd notice. I left one on Lila's doorstep. She'd notice. I kept one for myself. It felt necessary to make the fact tangible. Paper is a stubborn thing. It refuses to evaporate like online rumors. Then came the calls. A bank froze an account. A vendor put a hold on services. An investor halted a file transfer. Mark paced through the house like a man learning the shape of a trap, his neat gestures fraying into grasping motions. His sister called, her voice thin and sharp with worry, and his Aunt Margaret left a voicemail with the kind of moral fury that had the town listening. "You made a spectacle of us," she said, and in the background, I could hear the click-click of the HOA's teeth being bared. He came to the motel that night. He didn't knock. He let himself into the small room like he'd been living there for years. He had that look he reserves for emergencies paired with an attempt at charm, like a manager who thinks charisma can patch a blown fuse. "Anna," he said, closing the door softly behind him. "Please." I sat on the edge of the bed where the suitcase had been the first night, the files in a stack beside me. I didn't stand. I didn't move. I waited until his face changed enough that he realized charm alone wouldn't settle this. "Mark," I said, "you told me on the phone that there are people. I'm listening." He laughed once, a tight sound. "Do you know how many eyes are on this? I'm telling you, this is bigger than us. If I lose everything, it won't just be my fault." "It will be your fault," I said, "because you used my name." His jaw worked. It was expedience. A name on paper. She handled properties. I handled investors. No one thought it'd get out. "No one thought?" I echoed. "You mean none of you thought a house of cards might collapse when someone blows on it?" He looked away. For a second, the man I'd married, calculated, polished, quietly self-assured, was there like a mask slipping. "You don't understand the pressure. When you're in this field, people are ruthless." "Are they?" I asked. "Or are you just good at making them look that way?" His eyes flashed. "You could walk into this and ruin me." "Could I?" I set my hand on the stack of files so he could see. "I already have." He moved closer, the way predators move before they think. Not violent. There are other ways to try to reclaim control. He tried to appeal to shared memories, to the years we'd built together, like scaffolding around a collapsing roof. "Anna, please, let's talk. We can fix this. There are steps, lawyers, people who can help. Don't make it worse." "Don't make it worse," I repeated. "You used my name to hide your mess. You told me you were saving for the future. Meanwhile, you were laundering calls and signatures." He swallowed. "It's complicated." "Nothing that ruins people's lives is complicated. It's deliberate." The desperation began to shine through the practiced gestures. He paced, hands in his hair, every gesture seeking a handbook that didn't exist. "If you go public, really public, they'll blame you first because you're the name on the papers." "So?" I kept my voice level, even as something fierce buzzed under my ribs. "If I'm blamed, I'll have proof." "Think about your career," he said. "Think about what they'll say about you." I surprised him by smiling. I already thought about it. I thought about it when I found the suitcase. I thought about it when I found the ledger in Ashford. I thought about it when you thanked me for being patient while you worked late. I thought about it when your messages popped up on your phone. He reached for the phone on the nightstand. "If you're planning to spread this—" "You threatened me before," I said, cutting him off. "Now you're bargaining." He looked like a man who'd been offered a reflection he didn't like. "Anna." "No more Anna like I'm some polite accessory you can rearrange," I said. "Call me by my name like you signed it. Because that signature is what's at stake." He stared at me, and for a moment there was silence heavy enough to step into. Then he did the only thing he could think of. He tried to take the stack of files from the bed. He reached out. I was faster. My hand closed over his wrist. It was a small, practical motion. Nothing dramatic. but he recoiled like a man surprised the thing he wanted was resisting. "You can't take those," I said. "Those are not yours anymore." "I need them," he said. "You don't understand. If I can show where the money came from, if I can trace it." "You should have kept your story straight," I said, "not built it on my name." He laughed then, a sound like shrapnel. "You think it's that simple? I have investors who will take their money back. People who will sue. People who will... You don't know the circles I move in." "Then show me," I said. "Show me the investors. Make them call me. Let them ask me questions. Let them see how empty your explanations are." He recoiled at the suggestion as if I'd suggested he walk willingly into fire. He stumbled across the room, palms pressed to his forehead, then slammed them down on the dresser, in a gesture that might have been anger if it didn't smell so much like fear. "You're impossible," he said. "You always have been." I could have hit him then, figuratively. I could have catalogued every betrayal, every late night, every little gaslit moment. But instead, I watched him unspool in the way self-made men do when the market moves against them, small, panicked motions as they tried to hold water back with their hands. "You can still fix this," he said finally, voice hoarse. "If you do things my way, quietly. We cut a deal. You sign whatever paper I give you and it'll all go away." "No deals," I said. "No more deals." He looked at me like I'd moved into another country. "You don't even see how much you're risking." "I do," I said, "and I'm done being the risk you take." He left that night, but he didn't leave alone. He took a box of documents, a battered laptop, and a fury that felt near enough to touch. I watched him out the motel window until he drove away, taillights shrinking into the wet dark. He thought he was running from me. He was trying to outrun the consequences. The next morning, I got a call. A client of his had requested an emergency audit. Another bank had frozen a transfer. Someone in his network had started asking questions about collateral. The small town's rumor machine churned faster. People in Willow Lane started to avoid Mark when he did show up, their smiles gone thin and careful. He'd become a burden you didn't want near your barbecues. The more the world closed in on him, the bolder I became. I started sending files, anonymously, of course, to a few carefully chosen journalists, to a non-profit that handles white-collar fraud, to a lawyer who did pro bono work for whistleblowers. Each upload was precise. Background documents, linked transfers, recorded messages that showed intent. I never sent anything that didn't have an original source attached. No forgeries. I wanted to be unassailable. I wanted any future question to be answered with paper so clean it burned. Word traveled fast. By afternoon, a local news site had a headline about an ongoing financial probe into accounts tied to Grant Holdings. People I'd once waved to at neighborhood parties texted, asking if I was okay, if I needed anything. My phone was suddenly a bridge between worlds I'd once been on only the outskirts of. Friends who'd been polite in the past started to ring with offers of help. They were nervous, but their generosity was real. There's a difference between being alone and being acknowledged. When Lila reached out again, her tone had shifted from flippant to pleading. "Please," she texted, "this is spiraling. We can fix it." "We?" I wrote back. "You helped him." Silence for a long time. Then, I didn't know the depth of it. That's always the line, ignorance used as a shield. It rarely stands up to paperwork. Late that afternoon, I drove to the abandoned house one more time. The sky had bruised, evening pressing against the day. The house looked smaller, somehow diminished by the events unfolding in the world. I unlocked the side door with a key I'd copied from the desk months earlier when Mark left his office unlocked. The smell of dust and old paper greeted me like a familiar insult. He was there waiting. Not in my imagination, not in rumor, but in the room where the ledger lay. He'd brought the one unburned thing men like him clutch, dignity, or the last approximation of it. He looked less polished than usual. His hair was uncombed, collar rumpled, eyes rimmed with a light that said he'd been up for too long. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "You shouldn't either," I said, "but here we are." He closed the distance between us in slow steps, like a man trying not to spill the last of his dignity. "Anna." "Don't." The word was flat. "I have copies of everything. I've shared enough to make people listen." His hand twitched toward a drawer where he kept a small recorder. "You can't do this," he said. "I can explain. You can't explain away what you planned and signed in my name." I took a breath. "But you can still tell the truth." His laugh was brittle. "You think the truth will save you?" "No," I said, "but it will be cleaner than your lies." He lunged then, not at me, but at the window behind me, swinging his arm to shatter the glass in a wild attempt to change the scene. The pane cracked with an old, satisfying sound, and tiny shards fell like glitter on the floor. The commotion snapped something loose in me. Not rage, not triumph, but a precise, practical reaction. I grabbed the recorder from the drawer and held it between us like evidence and challenge. "Tell whoever you need to tell," I said. "Talk into this. Say your version. Tell them how you used my name. Tell them why. Or don't. Either way, people will hear." He stared at the device, then at the broken window, then at me. "You'll ruin us." "I already ruined the story you were telling," I said. "Now, either you help finish it honestly, or you thrash in the aftermath." He made a sound that might have been a surrender or a vow. The house around us hummed with the small noises of a place keeping secrets. Outside, thunder rolled, closer now as if applauding, and as the first heavy drops of the storm began to fall, I pushed the recorder toward him, and the world held its breath. The storm came like a guest who refused to knock. Rain hammered the motel roof while I packed the flash drives and clipped the recorder to my belt. Everything smelled of damp paper and nerves. I drove to the old house, headlights slicing through sheets of water. If Mark wanted to talk about control, this was the perfect setting. His empire reduced to creaking wood, and my name carved across his mistakes. The door opened without resistance. Inside, the air was thick with dust and regret. I found him in the study, soaked through, slouched like a man half shrunk by his own arrogance. "Anna," he said, trying for charm and landing somewhere between command and fear. "You know why I'm here," I said. "Sit." He sat. I placed the recorder on the desk and pressed the red button. "Talk," I said. "Tell me why you used my name." At first he spoke in jargon, asset protection, temporary holding, the vocabulary of people who use language to hide intention. I cut through it with numbers and dates until his mask cracked. He realized I had proof, copies, timestamps, everything uploaded. Bargaining began. "If you keep this quiet—" "No deals," I said. "You already made one when you forged my signature." The thunder punctuated every sentence. He leaned forward, eyes sharp with panic. "You could ruin everything." "That's the idea." He rubbed his temples. "You think this helps you? You'll go down with me." I smiled faintly. "Not with what I have." Before he could answer, 3 knocks came at the front door. Loud, deliberate. A voice followed. "Police." Mark froze. "You called them?" "I didn't need to," I said. "The files are everywhere now." He looked around like a man cornered by his own reflection. The knocks came again. He lunged toward the desk, maybe for the phone or the documents. I wasn't sure which, but I blocked him. "You wanted a stage," I said. "This is your spotlight." The officers entered moments later, rain dripping from their coats, flashlights sweeping across the room. One of them noticed the recorder's red light. "What's this?" "His confession," I said. Mark tried to speak, but his words tangled. Papers slid from the desk, spilling across the floor. Contracts, fake signatures, property lists. The officer bent down, eyes narrowing. "We'll need to take these." Mark backed away, desperate, voice cracking. "This is all misunderstanding." "Tell it to them," I said. "You've been practicing." He turned to me. "You planned this." I didn't answer. Silence can be louder than gloating. Another voice joined from the doorway. Dylan, the quiet maintenance worker I'd seen weeks ago. He stepped inside, rainwater streaking his jacket. "He's telling the truth," he said, handing the officers a thick envelope. "I worked for him. I saw how he used her name." Mark's face drained of confidence. "You?" Dylan didn't even look at him. "You promised you'd never drag her into it." An officer opened the envelope. "These corroborate the transfers," he said. "You've got yourself a trail." Lila appeared a few minutes later, drenched, shaking, mascara gone. She saw the papers, the lights, the officers, and looked at me with a hollow kind of apology. "Anna, I didn't know." "You knew enough," I said. She didn't argue. Her silence was confession enough. The officers read Mark his rights, voices calm and procedural. He didn't resist, just stared at me like a man seeing an unfamiliar landscape where his mansion used to stand. The camera flashes outside painted the room in cold bursts of white. I stood by the window and watched his reflection flicker in them, first proud, then angry, then simply small. When they led him out, he twisted back toward me. "You think this fixes anything?" "It fixes the record," I said. "That's enough." Outside, the rain had softened to mist. Reporters pressed forward, their voices clashing with the sirens. Lila stayed by the porch, hugging herself, too numb to speak. Dylan lingered near me. "He deserved worse," he said quietly. "I don't need worse," I said. "I just needed true." He nodded, a small, tired smile. "You'll be all right now." "Maybe," I said, "but he won't use my name again." An officer handed me a folder of statements and contact information. "You did the right thing," he said. "We'll take it from here." I nodded and walked to my car. The suitcase was still in the trunk, lighter somehow. I started the engine, letting the wipers cut clean paths through the glass. In the rearview mirror, I caught one last glimpse of Mark under the porch light, hands cuffed, shoulders bent, finally silent. The storm moved east as I drove. The road ahead shimmered with puddles reflecting streetlights, the air fresh with the scent of renewal. I didn't feel victorious or broken, just settled, as if the universe had finally stopped spinning without permission. The truth was no treasure chest, no tidy ending. It was simply mine again, my name, my story, my calm, and that was enough.